Hello, class. These are your notes for the circulatory and respiratory systems. I am obviously not here today, but I'm going to show you those presentations. Remember to use this note sheet. This is found on page 76. We taped this in last week. To take your notes today on the functions, the parts, and how your system works with other systems. So make sure you guys have this out with a pen or a pencil. All right, so the circulatory system. Let's start with this. Make sure you're on the circulatory system. Okay, first one, function. The function of the circulatory system, you can see, is to deliver food and oxygen to cells and to take carbon dioxide away from the cells. It's our blood, right? Blood takes food, or it takes nutrients and takes oxygen to our cells and removes carbon dioxide from our cells to be breathed out by the lungs. So write this down. You may have to pause the video here. 3 parts of the circulatory system would be the blood vessels, the heart, and the blood. This will be your next column. Write this down. These are 3 things you need to know about the circulatory system. Okay, I'll go through these pretty quick. So blood vessels consists of 3 things really: arteries, capillaries, and veins. Arteries, you can see, they take blood away from the heart. They pump blood away from the heart. Capillaries are what go into our tissues and our cells. They're really, really small. You can see here are capillaries. They're very, very tiny. And then veins are blood vessels that take blood back to the heart. So arteries take blood away, and veins take blood back to the heart. You don't have to write this down, so no need to pause. Second organ would be the heart. The heart pumps blood, right? We know what our heart does. Pumps blood to our body and also pumps blood to our lungs so that that blood can be reoxygenated and then back to the heart to be pumped out to the rest of the body. And lastly, blood is the 3rd part of the circulatory system. Probably the most important part, really, because it delivers the nutrients and the oxygen. There are 3 things that are in our blood. You have white blood cells, you have red blood cells, and you have this thing called platelets. Again, you don't have to be writing this down, but make sure that you know that blood is part of the circulatory system. All right, you need to be writing this down. So another system that works with the circulatory system would be the respiratory system, or the respiration system. So write that down in your, I believe it's your 3rd column. So how does the respiration system work with the circulatory system? So it says here the lungs, right, from the respiratory system work with the circulatory system by bringing in oxygen for our blood and then getting rid of the CO2 from the blood. So blood goes to your lungs, it gets rid of CO2, and then it also takes in oxygen that's come from your lungs. So you may have to pause to get all of these notes. All right, problem number 1, and again, you do not have to write this down. Just make sure you're listening. Problem number 1 is heart failure. Heart failure is when the heart can't pump enough blood. It's basically the muscle has weakened. It's no longer strong enough to pump blood to the rest of the body. Your heart is essentially failing. The muscles are not strong enough to pump blood. You can see here in this picture, here's a normal heart. You can see this outer wall is nice and thick muscle here. Heart failure, look at how small this muscle has become. It's just not very strong anymore. So your body just can't get the blood that it needs because your heart isn't strong enough. Hypertension is another one. Hypertension is when your blood vessels narrow, they cause blood to exert lots of extra pressure on the vessel wall. It's high blood pressure, really, and it's dangerous. It can cause a lot of things, like it can cause kidney failure, can cause blurred vision. Lots of different things can happen with hypertension. And some interesting facts. 8 million blood cells die every second, and the same are born every second, right? We use a lot of blood. Blood's got to be recycled over and over again. So that's the circulatory system. Make sure you have everything written down in your notes. Let's move on to the respiratory system. So find the respiratory system row in your notes. All right, what's the function? 3 functions here. To inhale oxygen, to exhale carbon dioxide. and then allows oxygen into your arteries, gets it into your blood. You may have to pause to write this down. Okay, 3 parts of the respiratory system would be the lungs, the trachea, and the diaphragm. That's how you pronounce those words, so write these down. These 3, lungs, trachea, diaphragm. And if you look at this picture, you can see the lungs. We know what lungs look like. The trachea is the kind of our windpipe, connects the lungs to our mouth. And underneath the lungs, we have this muscle called the diaphragm. Okay, the lungs. You don't have to write this down. The lungs, they collect oxygen from the air, and then they allow that oxygen to go into red blood cells. They also get rid of CO2. You can see this tube, the trachea, breaking off into your lungs, into smaller and smaller little tubes. That's where the air goes in, and that's where the blood vessels collect the oxygen. The trachea, kind of your windpipe. You can feel the trachea on the front of your neck. It's got these weird ribs on them. Basically, it gives structure to your mouth and to your lungs and connects them. That's basically what it is. Connects your mouth to your lungs. Trachea. The third one is the diaphragm. The diaphragm is it's a muscle that's underneath your lungs. You can see right here. What happens is as the diaphragm contracts, it lowers itself, causing air to go into the lungs. And then when you breathe out, this diaphragm relaxes and it actually pushes back up, which it forces air out of your lungs. So your diaphragm is really what allows you to breathe. It's what causes the lungs to inhale and exhale. Diaphragm. Okay, you'll be writing this one down. The respiratory system works with the circulatory system. And how does it do it? Down here it says that the respiratory and circulatory systems work together to circulate blood and oxygen through the veins in the body. Basically, the respiratory system brings in oxygen, and the circulatory system takes that oxygen and circulates it in the blood. Write it down. Problem number 1 with the respiratory system is influenza, also known as the common cold. This can give you lots of pain and lots of phlegm and coughing, and basically your lungs are they're having trouble, and so they need to exhale. They need to get rid of a lot of that phlegm. They need to get rid of whatever's in there. So you can get a fever sometime, muscle ache. You can get cough, runny nose, congestion, fatigue. You've all had a sore throat. You've all had like that time when you're coughing up all that gunk. Problem number 2 is COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. You can see that it's a narrowing of your bronchi and your trachea and your the tubes that go into your lungs. So what happens? Well, it can be caused from pollution, can be caused from smoking or other damage to your airways. Makes it hard to breathe, and you can't get as much oxygen. So you're really fatigued and tired all the time because you don't have as much energy. And some interesting facts about the respiratory system. The right lung is slightly larger than the left. That's because of your heart. Your heart is a little bit to the left side, and so the left lung takes up or gives that a little bit of room. Hair in your nose cleans the air that you breathe, and it warms it. And the fastest record sneeze is 165 kilometers per hour. So here are your notes for circulatory and respiratory system. You're now going to be reading an article about blood doping and then completing your pre-writing sheet about blood doping.